so much for joining us today. My name is Olivia Haynes, and I am the director of the Reuben Mark Initiative for Organizational Character and Leadership here at Columbia Business School. And I am so honored to welcome you to one of our premier events under the initiative, the C Suite Conversation Series, today with Athena Capital. This event is hosted as part of the Reuben Mark Initiative at Columbia Business School, which designs courses and programs to teach leadership skills necessary to create optimal organizational cultures. The initiative was established by Reuben Mark, former longtime chairman and CEO of Colgate Palmolive. Reuben is an exceptional leader with a pioneering vision for the importance of effective organizational leadership for a thriving business culture. And today's panel offers a unique view into how C suite leaders work together to design companies with effective cultures. The conversation will highlight the competitive advantage that exists when these partnerships are strong and collaborative across all function areas. So, at this time, I am so thrilled to introduce our moderator, Professor Todd Jick, the Reuben Mark Faculty Director of Organizational Character and Leadership at CBS. Professor Jick is a leading expert in leadership and organizational change with a long career in both academics and consulting work in the field. At CBS, you probably all know this, students. He has built the popular courses, which you can't get into, um, organizational change, advanced org change, and bridging the American divides, co-taught with Professor Bruce Usher. He has twice received the Singby Prize for Teaching Excellence, the ultimate prize here in teaching at Columbia Business School. And in 2024, he was recognized by Columbia University with the Presidential Award for Teaching. That's a big, big honor. So, all of that to say is we're in great hands this afternoon. So, thank you for joining us. I'm going to hand it to Professor Jick to get us started.
Give Olivia some applause. Give Olivia some applause. There we go. Well, it is a delight to be here. Thank you, Olivia, and nice to see everyone. I know it's not just the free lunch that's here, but that is an appealing aspect of being here. But you're here to see this very distinguished group and a very distinguished alum who I will introduce in a second. The C-suite series is especially interesting for me because the notion of an executive team being an actual team is for some people, it's called an oxymoron, meaning just because people are wearing executive hats and playing executive roles does not in and of itself make them a team, does not in and of itself mean they're collaborative, does in and of itself mean that they are able to do their jobs as the leaders of the enterprise. And it's for that reason and others that we now established this series to bring in teams of people from the executive suite, and we're particularly interested in that theme of how they work together, and we'll come to that in the questions. But let me do some quick introductions of the three distinguished panelists who are here. I'll start with Isabelle Freidheim, who's right next to me, who is the alum, class of '09. And when we have a returning alum, we're especially proud, particularly a very successful one like Isabelle, founder and managing partner of Athena Capital. She's an entrepreneur and an investor with experience in venture capital, private equity, SPACs, and IPOs. She's the youngest chair of a publicly traded company in the United States. That is a great distinction. And at Athena, she provides companies with international growth expertise and support, operational growth support, public readiness, product structuring, and access to capital. She is the chief poobah, in other words, of Athena Capital, and we will be very interested in hearing her perspective. Also, we'll be asking her a question about what it is that she wished she had learned when she was here, or she wishes you're learning while you're here, so that you can be prepared for the world that she's well aware of. So, Isabelle, we welcome you. Next to Isabelle is Kirthiga Reddy, and we had a great debrief, a great briefing call before the session a few weeks ago, and I was immediately impressed with her background. She's a renowned technology executive and growth stage investor with a career spanning about 3 decades, including her tenure as managing director at Facebook India. She didn't start as managing director. She was the first employee of Facebook India and took it to 400 million. Facebook India and South Asia, where she played a pivotal role in the company's expansion into emerging markets. Her role at Athena highlights her commitment to innovative technology, strategic leadership, and the cultivation of company culture. So we have many questions of interest to you to ask you, Kirthiga, as we go along. So Kirthiga is the second with us today, and the third, two tables away from me at this point. I said to Courtney, you're very safe because there are plenty of tables between us." Is a managing partner and deputy leader at Morgan Lewis. It's a global investment management practice. This is in the legal area. She advises global institutional investor clients on the terms of their inbound and outbound investments, including into private equity and other investment funds. She's a member of Athena's legal team and focuses on the Athena Capital Fund. So we have two insiders, one insider outsider, and we're going to be very interested to hear about the team and again their dynamics. So I thought what we do is quick, just start with a little bit of how you got to Athena Capital, because that's sort of the broad backgrounds of each of you. Isabel, I'll let you start. And then I want to ask a few questions about the firm and its business model, because some of you may be familiar, but most of you are probably not familiar. So let's understand the firm and even the concept of firm, which I have been explained is somewhat specific to the industry. And then we'll go to questions about the culture and the collaboration and the team. And at that point, I'm going to involve the Quib co-presidents, the chief poobahs who are sitting right in front of me now, Kirtna and Ainsley, who are going to ask some questions specific to the femaleness of this group and it's working. So we'll come to that a little bit later. And at the very end, we'll have time for Q&A. So be ready sort of for the last 15 minutes for your comments. All right, Isabel, maybe a little bit more about how you came to found Athena and kind of a little bit more about your own path to Athena itself.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
First of all, let me say that it's surreal to be here, knowing that I was here as a student. What feels like not so long ago, I guess must have been a while, but
'09 for them is very long ago.
yeah.
Very long ago. That they hardly remember.
So that feels really surreal, and it speaks to the twists and turns that life can bring. And I'm really thrilled to be able to share my journey between Colombia and now with you today. So we started Athena Capital somewhat recently, but my journey has been one as an investor and as a company founder. So I co-founded after having made venture capital investments after business school and to private equity investments. I co-founded a company called Magnify. I was the CEO of the company. We raised several rounds of financing, and we built a firm. So we started with just the two of us, my co-founder and I. It's a machine learning and artificial intelligence search engine for financial products. We were lucky to be in the right place at the right time. And I can speak more to this, but to fast forward, the company was acquired in 2020. And in 2020 was the boom of SPACs. And while I took a brief break after having sold the company, because it was very exciting and I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do next, I dove into something that was an opportunity that sat in front of me. And I initially thought I would do this on the side, and it turned into what is Athena today. Um, so the SPACs are basically, I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, but the concept is a publicly traded fund that only invests in one company, thereby taking it public. And what was really unique about what we did is that, first of all, we had a platform. So we had multiple SPACs, and we built a firm starting from there into what it is today as a fund. What was also very unique about it is that we made it all women. The reason being that it was at the time women were left out. And when we tried to hire the best talent and the highest execution capabilities that we could find in the market, well, guess what? The women were available, and a lot of the men who were high profile at the time, that was the name of the game in SPACs, was putting high profile people on the boards and in the executive teams. And all of those were taken because the men were very quick to jump into opportunities that were sitting in front of them, and the women on their own chose to sit back. So we brought all of this talent together, and through that, we're able to gather an incredible group of about 40 women across multiple different vehicles on management teams, on the boards of our vehicles, and as investors. And all of them were board members of Fortune 500 companies, company founders, regulators, and CEOs and investors. So this was the genesis of Athena that later on turned into a fund. So we're a new fund. We recently launched the fundraise for a fund, a growth equity fund that makes investments in tech companies that are private, about to exit. So about to exit through an IPO or through an M&A transaction. In a nutshell, that's it.
Just one quick follow-up, Isabel, for you. Did you take courses here on entrepreneurship or build startups or the like? In that era, I don't know that you had courses of that kind, or is this all just instinctual to
It was
you?
emergent at the time. It was certainly a hot topic, new classes that people were interested in. Some of them probably sold out. But I actually majored in macroeconomics or not a major, whatever it's called, like a
They don't major either. They don't major.
concentration in macroeconomics. I just took
Yeah.
more macroeconomics classes.
And it's not like the school sort of, there was a laboratory for this or whatever. This is you and your own sort of dreams and motivation to build firms. 'Cause this is what you seem to be doing.
I was always an entrepreneur at heart, and that was going to happen no matter what. But how to get there and how to make it work, I wouldn't say the school wasn't a good part of what took me. It was a big part of my journey. It was 2 years. It was relationships. It was um, and I was here as an undergrad as well. And I would say that Columbia as a whole and as an institution profoundly shaped who I am and my views of the world and my journey.
All right, we had to stick in the Columbia material early on here in this, but and then they're exposed to into many more entrepreneurship courses and startup courses today. Kirthiga, your background is very interesting, and you're representing technology and culture. Tell us a little bit more about how you came to where be at Athena.
Yeah, I'll talk about my journey in a second, but I'll highlight two things about Isabel's journey. And when you asked her where did entrepreneurship start from, she told us a story yesterday where when she was in school was her first entrepreneur journey, where she was selling tiger balm that she got from a flea market. Do people know what tiger balm is? Yeah. All right. So that's how early it started, and Colombia certainly has
Yeah, I was
played. She was 12 and played an instrumental role. And I want to highlight one more thing of what she said. She said, I was lucky to be at the right place at the right time. But everyone should parse that terminology and just acknowledge the foresight that she had, the vision that she had that shaped the company. And, given that there's also the woman in business team, I'll say that more women say they were lucky to be at the right place and the right time, where if it's a man, it's like, of course, it was so strategic and they spotted the exact moment. This is just research. I know all of the men in this room are phenomenal. So my own journey here is that as a builder and as an investor. And it is such a delight to be here talking about leadership and culture. And I also want to acknowledge someone who started at the Facebook India organization, yes, Anansha, who's now at Columbia. And it's that cultural aspect that really keeps those connections coming. So thank you for making the effort to join us today. And I'm looking forward to catching up. Built Facebook in India and then came back to headquarters, did a emerging markets role. Um, my journey to Athena Capital, I'd say one was that of serendipity. And I think it's an important message for all of us overachievers who think about, and I'm that way, I over optimize on my time. Like, how am I going to spend that next minute, that next hour? Am I making the biggest impact of my time? But a lesson to also leave room for serendipity and things that call your heart. I happened to go to an evening event that was supposed to be with amazing women leaders. Someone else couldn't go, and she said, oh, can you go in my place? I sat next to Isabelle. It's also a story of where preparedness meet opportunity. At that time, I was with SoftBank Vision Fund. I was their first female investment partner, deployed $1 billion for them, quantum computing, additive manufacturing, enterprise, health tech, and more. And a few of my companies had gone public through a SPAC. So we got started talking. She said she's building this incredible SPAC platform, had a very differentiated approach to it. And the next day, I mean, talking about the pace of movement, she said, should we do something together? And that weekend, I was at her birthday celebration in Aspen, and the rest is history in terms of joining her as part of the SPAC and now being part of Athena Capital.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to see you have a colleague here as well. We now have the third member of our panel, and Courtney, I guess you in part need to explain sort of your roles as sort of insider outsider. So say a little bit more about how you function in all of this and how you came to Athena Capital.
Sure. So there's a little invisible shield right here, and this is the risk adverse side of the table. Uh, and
Just hold your mic up a little higher.
so I've met Isabelle through one of my partners, who had met her through some industry events. And Isabelle was talking about her future plans with respect to Athena and this pivot toward a fund. And so, although I went to law school because I am personally risk averse, I love working with people in private funds because they're smart and they're innovative and they come up with new ways of doing things. And my job is to make sure they do them without getting into trouble. And so Kevin said, "Look, this is a great project. I really want you to meet her." So Isabel and I met one another, and it's a really interesting um, responsibility for both of us because Isabel and Kirthiga's job is to create value, new ways, and think outside the box. And my job is to make sure that they get to do that whilst sitting inside a fairly heavily regulated industry. Even though right now we're moving to risk based rule and compliance that way as opposed to more of a sort of exam function the way that it's been for the last couple of years. It is a heavily regulated industry, and you can get in a lot of trouble when you don't follow the rules. So that's the balance that legal brings to this triangle. Is it's not my job to say no, it's my job to make sure that we can say yes in a way that's permissible within the rules.
She says no so politely.
I remember when we had the briefing call and I heard you say that, and you were very supportive of the fact that she says no politely and even but tries to say yes more often
Well,
or
that's
figure out the solution.
And we were talking about in the pre-call, what is it that the legal side can bring to this audience and sort of what experience? Um, Lots of people avoid lawyers because sometimes they tell you, no, you can't do things, but make them support you. It's our job to make sure that you do what you want to do in a way that you're allowed to do it, not just to say no. And so that's a lot of communication. And we'll talk a bit more about the sort of the specifics in this relationship, but it's a really important um, example of where communication is key because you can talk right past one another and then it's simply not productive.
She sometimes also uses the yes and technique, which eventually leads to the no. And so,
So we'll come back to how you work together and how you sort of finesse some of those conflictual moments. But I think for those that are not familiar with Athena Capital and the like, I asked Isabel to just do a few moments about the sort of business model and the sort of special sauce of Athena Capital and where you're sort of going. So give people a flavor of the approach that you're taking.
We're a private equity fund, pretty standard private equity fund where we seek to bring LP institutional investors or sometimes family offices into a fund structure, and we invest in tech companies on their behalf, and we get paid for that. We get the typical fee is 2% and of management fee and 20% of carry. So we have a pretty standard structure, but what's not standard about us is how we go about sourcing our investments and about getting the opportunity to invest in the companies that we want to invest in. It's very competitive. Of course, we have competitors, and it might sound like sitting on the investor side. You're on the buy side, but we have competitors, and founders of companies will choose to work with the best and those that can add the most value when they have a choice. Because remember, we're taking a piece of their company, so they will choose carefully who they work with. So we have a really differentiated group of people that I referred to earlier who are Fortune 500 board members, company founders themselves, and that has been really key to our deal sourcing in the way in which we can engage with founders on a different level. We speak their language, we understand the journey that they have gone through, and we offer a service that is a partnership. So we don't just sit with founders like a lot of venture capital funds or private equity funds, we're growth. Will do and cut costs on a spreadsheet. We engage at a different level and we hold their hand as they go through a very meaningful transition in their journey. So some will go public, some will be acquired by a private equity fund, some will be acquired by a strategic investor. And that's scary. Some have been building their companies for 20 years since they were out of business school. And it can make or break the company, especially when the company goes public or when it's being acquired and changing control and being owned by a private equity fund. So we position ourselves as a true partner. But again, what's different is how we can find companies where we have known existing relationships with founders and how we can get that investment opportunity. Now, we were just talking about on the way here what what kinds of funds there are. So there are fund managers that will be very, very good at investments, and they will make investments in whether it's debt products or equity products. In our case, it's equity. It will generate great returns, and they're solely focused on the investment process. There are funds on the other side who will build a firm, and that's what we do here. By the way, there's no right or wrong answer. LP investors will very much enjoy investing in the first type of investors that will be very focused, heads down on doing fundamental analysis on their product. But in our case, we've decided to go a different route where we're building a firm, a culture, a long term opportunity for us to continue to grow. Perhaps into different products in the future. For now, we're focused on private equity, but to grow in how we can attract talent because that's what it is about. That's who we are. It's talent. So we're really thrilled to be on this journey early in the journey, despite having gone through a pivot ourselves essentially. But this has been our focus is to build a firm.
Yeah, and to build on what Isabel said, our thesis is also that approach of both the fundamental analysis and the value add set of services is what leads us to better ability to invest in the right companies, the better, Isabel spoke about competitiveness. Um, for the best companies, there are always multiple checks that are chasing them, and you have to be able to stand out. And so, our belief is that focus on both the fundamentals as well as the value add nature is what's going to let us win those deals and also add differentiated value for them. And to give you a specific example, even if I go back to the journey of the SPAC, we are taking a company public now that's in the sustainability space, is green, um, and they do lead lithium battery recycling. They had multiple other offers on the table. It was both one, the caliber of the team that was sitting on this side. I mean, we have people, of course, that you see on the stage, but people like Judith Rodin, who was the first female president ever of an Ivy League, first female president of Rockefeller Foundation, and 39 other women like that. There really is not another team that exists that has that caliber of talent that is also very, very focused on doing all they can to help their companies. No matter which company we have touched, the kind of relationships that we have helped bring them, whether it's making suggestions for people on the board, making introductions on the acquisition side, making like sales related efforts. It's just unbelievable. No matter what they want and what their priority is, our network is able to source.
All right. Well, before we get to what you implied that women are the superior gender, we
Was that implied or was that?
that's exactly asserted, asserted. Um, let's shift to the notion again of assembling talent in terms of the C-suite itself, as that's our focus for today. So, can you say a little bit more about the different styles of sort of the C-suite group that you've assembled, Isabella, and then each of you maybe can speak to it, and then I'll ask our Quib leaders to ask a little bit more about how you collaborate together. But give us a flavor of the way in which you've assembled the group and what your own expectations are of everybody to work together.
Ideally, you want a mix of different risk profiles and in different appetite for optimism. Now, we have just a team of optimists, so that's why we have Courtney.
Courtney. All right.
So I'm kind of breaking the rule here on probably what you teach students, but it has been helpful because we have gone through a very challenging and turbulent market where it seemed impossible to follow through on our mission and on our commitments to deliver returns to our investors that we raise capital from. And we were stuck. We cared tremendously, especially being all women, about following through. And we rolled up our sleeves and kept working hard. We put our heads down. We leveraged on our relationships, on our group, on the mission, the internal mission that we have to succeed for the women who follow us. And that's what helped us move through, along with that optimism. So it served us well.
You want to echo that, or how would you?
Yeah,
You've worked on different sort of executive teams, so I
yeah.
think you can also contrast it.
Yeah, so I think from an optimist perspective, yes, we share those traits strongly, but we also bring very different perspectives to it and very different expertise and very different networks to it. And Isabel is incredibly connected in the financial services sector, incredibly connected in, I would say, the fintech entrepreneur sector. And I am then able to bring in a different set of connections, expertise, both from the places that I've invested in as well as the companies and the sectors that I've worked on. And so we're very complementary that way. And so really thinking about that complementarity in addition to things that are really common. The other thing we've really focused on is open conversation. I remember Brent here telling me about his observation of how we work together and said it's remarkable to see the kind of candid conversations that the two of you can have about all of the really deep challenges and be supportive of each other through that journey. And so again, it's a very special relationship. And when you go through the trenches and you go through both the highs and the lows together, it creates for that foundation.
What happens? Is there conflict though that emerges, despite sort of a shared ideology of optimism and the like? Is there conflict, and if when it occurs, how is it resolved?
Well, to me, the concept of being experts at what we do trumps emotional conflict that can occur and different views. So ultimately, we are specialists and product specialists. We know our product really well. We're very technical. We don't just have relationships with founders. We deeply understand the fundamentals of the companies that we invest in, the markets we invest in the case of SPACs, the products that we operated in. And a lot of it took us by surprise, different regulatory environments that changed on us, markets that changed on us. And of course, it can create tensions, but having the deep understanding of the product and of what we do it helps because it trumps every conversation that's at this level and brings it down to the rational level.
Well, let's pursue a little bit more about how you have collaborated then so well, and I'm going to ask Ainsley to come up and ask a question on behalf of the Columbia Women in Business Group that I think speaks to that issue. So, Ainsley, please.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. This question's for you, Isabel. You've talked a little bit about building your team and how the women were just the people with potentially the best talent, but I'm hoping you could double click into that a little bit more and talk about as you started building this team, was that originally your intention, or just a little bit more detail about how it came to be that it is all women? Because it's so unique that we see something like this. I don't think we've ever talked with a full women's C-suite, so we'd just love to hear more.
Well, I'll tell you how I started. It was the boom of SPACs in 2020, and I had a number of companies in my own portfolio that I had invested in who were interested in going public and who approached me. And I thought there's a great opportunity, something to do while I figure out what I'm going to do next. And the name of the game at the time was find the highest profile person you know in your contacts and put them on the board of your SPAC. So it was athletes, it was actors, it was anyone who was known and had a reputation, even if they didn't have a reputation in the financial environment. But so that was the game. And I went and I had great contacts, but I went through my contacts and I thought, shoot, everyone's taken and I'm late to this SPAC thing. And then I took a closer look and I realized that the women were not taken. The men were taken, the women were not taken. And I started putting two and two together and I thought, well, um, this is a great opportunity to tap into a pool of talents that has these execution capabilities and this network that we can create that I wouldn't have been that may not have had access to so quickly. So the speed of execution is what I was after because it was a fast moving public market at the time, an opportunity. So that's how it became all women. But also there was a part of me that thought, you look back at a lot of financial products, or companies or movements throughout time, and you look back at leverage buyouts in the 80s and the high yield boom in the 90s, and then hedge funds and then private equity, founding of tech companies, venture capital. Every single time is the same pattern. So you see men who are there at the table. You see women. There are plenty of women in private equity, but they showed up 10 years later when it's that much harder to claim a market share and to be in an empowered place in that product and be a true leader. Right. When you think of the founding fathers or founding mothers of private equity, um, David Bonderman, who was a friend who passed away recently, is an example of a founding father of private equity products. But we seldom see that among women. So I wanted to change that paradigm. And look, a lot of work has been done for us, and I'm so grateful to what women have done for us throughout history for us to be at that point where we can take it a little step further and do our part in history to change that. So our mission at the time was also to empower women economically. So it's great to be on a board, and we have a lot of women who are on boards, but that's not a true economic opportunity. You don't make money by being on a board. So we wanted to again do our very small part, a building block in the history of where we will get to with women and parity, but and in a place, a true place of opportunities for women, which is to have that economic empowerment. Because as sad as it sounds, in our industry, in the financial industry, it is a measure of success, how much money we make, right? And it empowers you to do more.
Yeah.
Kirthiga, add to it.
Yeah, so I think women can learn from men in terms of just their ability to assess risk and to jump into it and to not to overthink things. And it shows out in patterns like what Isabel mentioned. And certainly for me, when Isabel and I spoke about this, we were looking out at that time, 3% of SPAC executive teams being women. And it's like, why is it once again, single digit? And it is so important, as Isabel mentioned, for people to be there early, because otherwise you end up in situations where it's going to take us 100 years to get to parity. And if you start that way, that's how it ends up too. And so it's a really important, message for everyone in this room to again jump in early. And frankly, for me, so that was the jumping it into the SPAC where I might not have thought about it otherwise. I now have a deep tech company too. It's a AI powered blockchain platform that's all about trust in the age of AI. Same thing, single digit percentage of female founders in the deep tech space are female. And so it's one of those, if not us, who, if not now, when. And so that was a very important part. But so I guess one fascinating incident as we were raising for the SPAC too, we remember, and Isabel tells the story beautifully, where she says, we were talking to bankers, and one of the bankers says, oh, I have to run a conflicts check because I think there's one other all female SPAC team that I'm also representing. So I have to run a conflicts check. Okay. All right. How about all men teams that they're representing and there's no conflict check
We're
there?
500 SPACs at the time.
But they have to run a conflict check because this might be another one of me. So it's fascinating, right? And we're not talking about a decade ago. We're talking about like a few years ago, and that's where we are.
Well, Courtney, you want to comment on this part of it? Kirthiga, are you ready for your question? You want to comment because I know that your experience in the legal profession may have some of the same dimensions in terms of male female parity.
That's so easy. Global law firms are not exactly known for their gender diversity, particularly at the more senior ranks. But again, the opportunity that we had with Athena was a great example of this sort of take a project that's a little bit off the beaten path where you get in early on something. Like this was something that was fun to help with, help them think outside the box. And Isabel alluded to it before. It's been a very difficult 2 years for anybody trying to raise funds. I don't care if you're Apollo. It's not as easy in the last 2 years as it was for the 8 to 10 years prior to that. Anybody could raise a fund 5 years ago. It's been much more challenging. And in this industry, there's 2 sides to it. You have 2 remarkable experts here who know where the opportunities lie, but you have to raise the funds underneath to be able to go out and make the purchases and make the market changes that you see and that you want to. So, one of the things that I never learned in law school and really wasn't until I became a more senior lawyer is every job has a sales aspect to it also. Whether you are on the business side, whether you're on the legal side, there's always going to be a sales aspect to what you do. So, being supportive of something that you believe in and something that you believe is gonna make a difference makes the sales part of it that much easier, and I think it's been a pitch that some investors have really reacted to and are interested in seeing what Athena can do.
Well, that you want to comment?
Yeah, I'd like to add
That
something here. So, the way in which we were able to elevate to the next level was by not focusing on the fact that we were all women. So, that became an internal mission. We don't invest in just female founded companies because there aren't enough of them, especially when you get to a growth stage. And we focus on returns. So, our mission is to deliver returns to our investors. That's it. So, the all women aspect is very much internal, but it is such a powerful engine internally.
All right, Kirthiga, another question from the Quib co-president.
Thank you so much for your candor in kind of addressing a bit of a tough question. I have a two-parter for all three of you. So diving a bit deeper into what Ainsley asked, and I know we've kind of looked into how people perceive Athena from the outside, but kind of diving on the inside. Part one is how do you find that the structure makes you a more stronger, symbiotic company, both as a whole and within the company culture? And then part two is I know you touched upon some of the challenges, some of the conflicts, but what are some unique challenges to a company with this structure?
Well, one big challenge is that we are closely watched by everyone around you and by women, with the women before us, after us, around us. So we feel a huge sense of responsibility to get it right. Um, And then I will say to your other point, I pinch myself every day when I think about how lucky I am to work and be surrounded by such incredible brains. And to each of the women, and typically when you look at any minority group in any environment, there's a nonlinear journey that takes people to success. So that's also a fascinating aspect of the relationships that we have and the types of people that we have. We have a retreats we get together every year, and we have pods in different cities. So whenever we get together in person, because everyone's kind of scattered, it is incredibly exciting to hear about every person's journey and how they got there. And you would never think that some of these women would make it to board of a Fortune 50 company in the US based on where they came from. I mean, um, we had an orphan from Korea. We had a team of all immigrants. All of us are immigrant actually here and in the management team as well. Um, I came from France. Kirthiga came from India. Um, Dami came from Nigeria. We had an incredibly diverse group, and it is, and we were talking about that yesterday. Actually, it's such an incredible motivator and the legacy of what of how hardship in somebody's life can turn them into a super performer.
Um, yeah, I just build on the themes that Isabel so beautifully articulated. We are just at it in terms of both the mission and the returns. And nobody asks us to do this, but we carry the burden of all female founders, all female CEOs like on our shoulders and says, oh my God, like we cannot like not succeed. We have to succeed because it's not just about like our personal journeys and our personal careers, but what we represent. Um, one just picture that I will always remember when people ask me like what drives you, what comes up is my mother who didn't have the opportunity to finish her high school education because her parents said you only need enough math to do the grocery bill. This was back in India, and by the way, her brother got a postgraduate degree, so it was clear that the value of education was known. And fast forward to the IPO bell ringing that Isabel and I did. My mother joined us over Zoom. This was at the New York Stock Exchange. And so there she was, someone who hadn't had a chance to have her education at the New York Stock Exchange with her daughter, with her granddaughters. Isabel's daughter was also there on Zoom behind us. And it was just very poignant about the difference that one generation can make and the difference that we need to make for the next generation. So we are at it. While many other companies, firms of a similar style literally just gave up and told their investors it's a complete write-off, it's zero. Many, really large one, really large name ones, they just gave up. We were at it and we will deliver superior returns compared to anyone in our peer group. So I think that's one. And I think that deserves a round of applause for just what we're doing together. Yeah. And that was one part of your question. Did I address both sides or yeah?
Okay, I think you did. Courtney, do you want to comment on this?
I'm
You
not
want-
going to follow that. No.
No, oh, what if
Hey, can I just say that we work very nicely with men? We're actually
you're
bringing it.
asking me for that, so I've sensing the pressure.
We're bringing men on our board, and we're certainly leveraging on all of the capabilities that surrounds the amazing group that we have.
But what I'm also hearing you say, Isabel, is that they're as pioneers in this, and with the ideologies you have, there's an extra pressure. You're being scrutinized, somewhat maybe unfairly judged in some instances. So is that? I mean, is that just something that comes with the territory? Or I mean, again, you're saying to the next generation of leaders and many female leaders in this room, do you say, look, you're going to bear an extra burden in coming out into this male world?
Yeah, and maybe some of it we put that pressure on ourselves. We do this, right? I don't feel judged. In fact, I think most people, we've come such a long way, and most people in the corporate environment and the financial industry don't mean to discriminate. I mean, people want welcome with open arms, women on their boards, minorities on their boards. So, however, there continues to be unconscious discrimination simply because the data might not exist. So, a lot of people think, well, I've seen someone like Mark Zuckerberg execute, I know this works. And they won't say this to themselves. They certainly won't say it out loud, but it is somewhere in the back of their minds. And changing this data by creating the historical data in people's heads and making it so they have seen it. They have seen Black women execute and deliver returns. They have seen women. They have seen minorities. That is more powerful and speaks for itself. That's why focusing on the quality and delivering returns is so important.
You can't be what you can't see. I remember when I was transitioning from Facebook, my initial thought, I was talking to my executive coach, and I told her, I think I'm going to go be a COO of an early stage startup. And she looked at me and she said, why COO? Like, why not CEO? And I said, I see like Mark and Cheryl and, that partnership. And I think I'm really good at execution. And so I can be that partner. And she said, I think there are like more than half of Silicon Valley companies that are actually being actually run by incredibly talented female executives with a male CEO. And I need to push you to think broader. And it really made me rethink. I was like, you're right. Like, why do I not have CEO in my ambition in addition to COO? So you can't be what you can't see. And that's what, we are hoping to also represent and be. And for every single male ally that's in this room, thank you. We couldn't do this without you. And so, really, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, let me use that as a way to ask my last question and then open it up to all of you because I know that this has stimulated a lot of questions. Because you're really starting to give some advice to the group here, and that was my question: is you got many CBS students here that aspire to leadership roles in entrepreneurship, tech, and finance and investing. So, what advice do you give them? And Isabel, you may be well suited in terms of what it would be like as a student, but I think you were given coaching advice yourself, sort of in today's world. What advice would you give folks in this room? Career advice. It's very timely because some of them are still looking for jobs.
I will say that there's a very fine line between risk aversion and your ability to succeed, right? So many students will go on to have very corporate careers. Is that safer? Not necessarily, because um, you're not necessarily limiting your success potential when choose to become an investor and there's a level of risk. So um, there's 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 value in taking a risk and there is some risk in not taking a risk, and it is possible to hide behind risk aversion. And so my advice would be to really think about that carefully as you make career choices. And that can be taken into a corporate environment. And in fact, I would argue that entrepreneurship, especially when you start seeing classes taught in entrepreneurship in business school, becomes commoditized. And you see a lot of entrepreneurs that are quote unquote entrepreneurs, but they will go through a path that has been laid out for them. They'll do the 2 years at Google, they'll go do Y Combinator, they will do take the next step, and it's a path that they're following. Is that really true entrepreneurship? Not necessarily. You can demonstrate true entrepreneurship when you allow yourself to have the audacity to think differently, right? And that can be done in a corporate environment. It doesn't have to be that you're taking a huge financial or personal risk.
Yeah, I mean, those of the students here that have taken my course in organizational change, we talk about sort of an hourglass image of early in your career, take risks. Later in your career, take risks. Middle of the career, it's more difficult. You have more family obligations. But the notion again, you don't have far to fall early in your career. Take some of those risks. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I'd say lead the lives and careers that you want to versus what you think or society or your peers are telling you. And two quick examples. So one, I had my first child while I was in my first year of business school. This is the other business school on the other side of the coast at Stanford, and it was recruiting time, and I had to make a decision of whether I take a full load of classes and with a child, an infant child, and graduate on time, or whether I participate in campus recruiting, which is a class in itself, as we all know. And it was agonizing, especially as an Asian person, to think about, oh, what if I graduate and I don't have a job, right? But it's everything is in your mind. I just made the decision that I just want to graduate on time, and I wanted to do a startup. Anyway, startups don't recruit as much during campus recruiting, so I'll graduate and then figure out what's the right role for me, right? So that was one. Two, when I graduated, I decided, I mean, one thing's that one graduates and gets, a title raise, a pay raise, which I hope is the case for everyone. But I consciously made the choice to go to a startup from coming from a very big company. I was a director of engineering before, and I took a 40% pay cut and a title cut to be a senior product manager at this startup. And I again remember agonizing about it. And I had some executive search friends tell me, if this is a short term decision, don't do it. If this is a long term decision, a career that you want and an industry that you want, things will just equalize. We all will live to be 80, 90, 100 and beyond unless something untoward happens. So we have a long time, and your career will move very quickly. So even today, if you look at my LinkedIn, it'll seem very linear. Oh my God, she was a director of engineering, Stanford. Your eyes will go to director of product management because again, I rose very quickly, and then general manager of India. But what you will not see is also written there, my senior product manager, my group product manager. So it's a jungle gym. It's a career jungle gym, not a ladder. Live the lives that you want to live.
All right, Courtney, I'm going to let you maybe off the hook for a second and let some of these questions come out. So we've got about 10 minutes. I'd love to get some questions from around the room. I'm sure there are microphones somewhere right in front of me. Yeah, terrific. Here's a hand. No, you are. Stand up. I can give you my microphone. Hold on, I'll give you my microphone.
Well, thank you so much for being here. This has been a really energizing conversation, so appreciate your time. We've talked a bit about some of the biases that you face, but I'm curious how your identities as women, immigrants, mothers helped you either secure that fund from the institutional investor or get that deal with the founder when it was really an asset for you.
Yeah, true. I guess we are being recorded as well, so I'll be careful.
Uh,
Um, yes, thank you. All the training, and Livy as well. Yes. Yes. All right. So, listen, so it was one of the deals very hotly sought after. It was 10x oversubscribed, and I mean, I really wanted to invest in this company, and it was Women's International Engineering Day, and the company posted about all the women engineers in the company. And I'm talking to him and I'm saying, listen, you really need to take our allocation. And he said, yeah, I have to think about all the trade-offs. And then I said to him, oh, by the way, congratulations, all these women engineers on your table. I said, I have a question. Like, how many women investors are you talking to as part of this fundraise? And there was a moment of silence, right? Because one, he had never thought about it. He had literally never thought about it. Um, and he said, oh, just one. I said, okay, you might want to have more diversity in your cap table because it's also proven to deliver, greater results. And so that's what you might want to do. And by the way, I don't know whether how much that influenced or not. And I will also call out that there was another male ally who was also on the board and existing investors who was very strongly making the case for me and saying, I know her, I know how much value she can build. And it was those two things that led to it. The company is now publicly traded, $6 billion. It was a tremendous exit and a tremendous return for them.
I would just say focus on people that you have common interests with. You'd be amazed at the way that you can relate to people in a professional setting with personal touches. There have been plenty of calls. I have 4 kids, the youngest 2 are about to turn 16. I cannot tell you the number of ridiculous situations I would find myself in. A famous one being where I was trying to take a conference call in the car, and the 4 of them were in the back, and I jumped out of the car because we were in the driveway, and the stupid Bluetooth kept kicking back in. And they're all in the car whooping it up, and the guy that I'm trying to negotiate seriously with would be like, "Hey, yeah, so you might wanna put your kids in the house because they're getting a little antsy." And it it broke the ice. It was horrifying, don't get me wrong, it was 100% horrifying, but it broke the ice and allowed us to finish the last portion of a difficult negotiation where we were both kind of digging our heels in. So whatever angle works, whether it's your gender, whether it's your life experience, whether it's your personal interests, whether it's your family or your culture, there are ways that you can think outside the box and relate to people that end up being really productive from a professional sense.
So for me, 2 things. First of all, having children, I have 3 children, helped me understand human psychology. It was a crash course. Um, but it really has helped me approach conversations and relationships with love and kindness, and just think of people as humans and by understanding where they come from as children. The other one is it gave me a different purpose, a sense of purpose and a mission. So one of my children is a girl, and that was a motivator, but it is for my boys as well. And I'll give you an example. Actually, I work a lot. I work long hours, and my children don't really understand what I do because it's not very tangible, um, and not much I can show for. And I once did a Bloomberg interview, and usually I don't think much of when I do an interview to share with my children, but my daughter came across, and she was 7 at the time. She came across the video, and she was captivated, and she said to whoever is watching, "This is my mommy." And so it really made me feel good about the trade-off because there is a trade-off.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here. I am very curious to learn if there are any investment decisions that you wish you could change in retrospect. And also, in an environment where DEI seems under attack, how are you fighting back?
You know, yeah, on the DI one, I get asked this all the time, right? And they'll come and tell me, oh, I don't know, pick any company. What do you think of like Meta's policy? What do you think of Goldman Sachs? And I think they just want me to respond back and, use those company names again. And I think my only response is really it makes us just more stronger in our conviction of and makes us want to work 10 times harder. And I think that's the only thing that you can do. A fight is not over unless people give up. And so that's literally what keeps us focused and motivated. So that's the second one. Your first question, anything else on?
I actually can't answer that one. We're one of the 20 firms that was targeted by the administration with the published EEOC letters. So I think you guys have it right. You prove this to be a false flag by showing that it's not because of DEI that people are successful. It's that successful people believe in DEI and it makes the organization better. It's not an excuse. It's just a venue of sharing smarts and sharing opportunities and making things stronger because you're casting from a wider net. When is casting from a wider net a bad thing? So I think I would have to leave it at that, but agree completely that you will get past this by proving the theorem.
Yeah, I mean, again, we never positioned ourselves as a diverse group. It's an internal mission. So we're here for performance.
Investments that you I guess that you regret or would do differently today.
I don't know how to answer that because it really applies to all life decisions.
Yeah. I'll tell you actually an investment that actually did not pan out from a returns perspective, but that I would invest in the founder all over again. And this was at SoftBank, where we invested in Pear Therapeutics, which was a pioneer in prescription uh, software as medicine. And so they had the first FDA approved software for treating opioid use disorder, substance use disorder, insomnia. And just from the economics perspective, given how slow the rate of reimbursements and changes in the states happen, the maps did not cross each other, and they had to go and do an asset sale. And it was painful. It was really painful to see that journey. This founder, it was a MD, PhD, had put in 10 years of his life into this mission. And it was really hard to see that journey. But again, as SoftBank Vision Fund, I mean, if a firm like that doesn't also make bets like that, in addition to the other company that I mentioned, which again, it all averaged out to our group having the best IR, best returns overall. But that is a founder that I would again bet all over when he does his next company.
So if I think about the worst investment that I've made, we took a company public that later on ended up filing for bankruptcy. We did our part. We took the company public. We raised capital for the company. They were very unlucky with the timing. It was a great company. Do I regret it? No, because it was a learning experience. And we gave someone very good a chance to succeed and we supported them. Um, so I think either you succeed or you learn. So do I regret it? No, because I certainly learned from it.
There was
Th-
one more question
It's
there. I know he's.
oh, I see. That's
Did you have a question? Okay.
he's going to ask a tough one. I can tell you that. Here it comes.
Um, I'm curious if you could reflect a little bit on your learning journey as entrepreneurs and founders. What are some of the things that you did to lay the foundations early on in the company that would help for long-term success? Because being an entrepreneur is also balancing sort of what you have to do short term and then also thinking about what the company looks like long term. So, yeah, what are some of the things you'd recommend to make sure you're thinking about early on so that the company is successful later?
We had a lot of plans and it didn't work out. I mean, we followed the textbook as much as we could, but very often you get caught up in the day to day in building a company as fast as you can and exploiting very small resources. So that was my experience in trying to lay the path for long-term success because often what you might need to put in place for a company that's going to go public and it's in its early stages is very abstract. But the best you can do is put in place a culture. And that culture can be changed over time. And so this is actually something that I really want to emphasize that the culture that you design for your company is something that can be changed by you, by your employees, and that can evolve if it's not right. And different cultures can serve different purposes at different times in the life of the company. And if I think about, for example, Colombia here, we're not here to make political statements, but you're in a moment of change right now. And you students are in a position in which you are able to redefine the culture that you want for the university. And just because you're business school students doesn't absolve you from the responsibility of defining a culture, right? And as I mentioned earlier, Colombia was really meaningful in shaping my views of the world. But we're now in a unique opportunity, a unique moment in time when you have the option to flip that around and you be the meaningful actors on the culture of the school. And that's true for companies as well. Just because you're in a corporate environment doesn't mean that you don't have the power to do what's right for the company at the time.
Isabel, we were having such a good time until you finally challenged us to do something. We were just absorbing all of this and enjoying listening to how you're. But it's a good answer to the question about the culture that uh, you have the agency to create and to recreate, and we have the agency to create and recreate right here. We are. I have another dozen questions, but they don't have another dozen minutes. And you don't have another dozen minutes. So I'm going to use this as the opportunity to thank all of you for a number of things. First of all, as an alum coming back, are we not proud of our alum and what she's done? Amazing. So the prayers. That's your applause. Second of all, as a team, as an all-female team and a very distinctive one, I think we're especially appreciative to see how this works and how you've gathered. And to Juliana's question, in an environment that's getting more challenging on a lot of fronts that speak to sort of diversity and the like, for you to take a strong position and be yourselves is especially appreciated. And the fact that you're also, while talking of love and kindness, also talking about making money. And we appreciate the combination of that. So I leave it to you to ask informal questions, but for all of us to thank our very distinguished and successful panel in sharing their insights with us this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.